The blood on Clara Thompson's hands had long since dried by the time she stumbled into Wilcox, Arizona, her boots kicking up dust that settled on her tattered skirts like a second skin. She had killed a man 3 days prior, not out of malice but necessity, when he had tried to force himself on her in a camp outside Tucson. And though the law would likely call it self-defense, a woman alone with no proof and no words to write her story would hang just as quick as any murderer. The year was 1884, and the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, swallowing her secrets beneath a relentless sun that bleached bones and burned away the past. Clara had learned early that silence was survival. At 22 years old, she had spent her entire life hiding a shame that ate at her insides worse than hunger ever could. She could not read. She could not write. The letters on signs and wanted posters might as well have been chicken scratch for all the sense they made to her. And in a world where a signature meant everything from claiming land to testifying in court, she was less than nothing. Her mother had died when Clara was 6, too young to have learned more than the alphabet song, and her father had been a drunk who believed daughters needed to know how to cook and clean, not waste time with books. When he drank himself to death 4 years back, she had been left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a shame so deep it had roots in her bones. She had drifted from town to town, taking work where she could find it, washing dishes, mending clothes, cleaning hotel rooms. She learned to nod when people gave her written instructions, then watch carefully to figure out what they actually wanted. She memorized the shapes of important words: danger, closed, men, women. She pretended to read menus by ordering whatever the person before her had gotten. She had become an expert at deception, at making people believe she was simply quiet or thoughtful rather than desperately, achingly ignorant. Wilcox was smaller than Tucson, but bigger than some of the dying mining camps she had passed through. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a bank, a hotel, and a livery stable. Wooden sidewalks kept folks out of the mud when the rare rains came, and the buildings looked sturdy enough to withstand the harsh seasons. Clara walked into the hotel with her last few dollars clutched in her hand, praying they would be enough for a room and a meal. The woman behind the desk was round-faced and kind-eyed, which Clara took as a good sign. "Help you, dear." "I need a room," Clara said, her voice rough from days of disuse. "And I am looking for work, any kind of work." The woman studied her with the practiced eye of someone who had seen plenty of drifters. "Name's Margaret Wells. I own this place with my husband. We could use someone to help with the laundry and changing linens. Pay is not much, but it includes a room and 2 meals a day." Relief flooded through Clara so fast her knees nearly buckled. "I will take it, thank you." "What's your name, honey?" "Clara Thompson." Margaret nodded and pulled out a ledger, dipping a pen in ink. "I will need you to sign here." The world tilted. Clara stared at the book, at the lines of text she could not decipher, at the blank space where her name should go. Her throat tightened. I hurt my hand," she lied, holding up her right hand. "It is difficult to write just now. Could I sign tomorrow when it is better?" Margaret's expression shifted, something like understanding flickering across her face, but she did not press. "That's fine, dear. Let me show you to your room. You can start work in the morning." The room was tiny, barely big enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it had a door that locked and a window that let in light. Clara sat on the bed and put her face in her hands, allowing herself one moment of weakness before she stood and washed the trail dust from her skin. She would make this work. She had to. The work was hard but honest. Clara rose before dawn to haul water, scrub linens, and hang them to dry in the scorching sun. She swept floors, emptied chamber pots and changed sheets in rooms that sometimes smelled of whiskey and sometimes of sadness. Margaret was patient with her, never asking her to read anything, and Clara suspected the older woman knew her secret but was too kind to say it aloud. The other women who worked at the hotel, two young girls named Sarah and Jane, chattered constantly about things Clara could not follow, gossip from newspapers and letters from distant relatives. She smiled and nodded and felt the familiar ache of being on the outside. 3 weeks into her employment, Clara was hanging laundry behind the hotel when she heard the sound of hooves. She glanced up to see a man dismounting from a dark bay horse, moving with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on his feet. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of wheat stubble. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, scuffed boots with spurs that jingled softly. A hat shaded his face, but when he looked up, Clara saw eyes the color of a summer sky. He tipped his hat to her. "Afternoon, miss." Clara nodded back, suddenly aware of how she must look, sweating and disheveled with her hair escaping its pins. "Afternoon. I am looking for Margaret Wells." "She around?" "Inside," Clara managed, then returned her attention to the laundry, hoping he would move along. But she could feel his gaze lingering for a moment before he headed into the hotel, and something about it made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. She learned his name that evening when Margaret mentioned it at supper. Isaac Young, a ranch hand from one of the bigger spreads outside town. He came into Wilcox every few weeks for supplies and to deliver messages for his boss, a cattle baron named Henderson, who owned half the grazing land in the territory. Isaac was known as honest and hardworking, Margaret said, not like some of the cowboys who spent their pay on cards and women. Clara told herself it did not matter. She was not in Wilcox to moon over handsome cowboys. She was here to survive, to stay invisible, to keep her shame hidden. But Isaac Young seemed to have other ideas. He started appearing at the hotel more frequently, always with some excuse. He needed to drop off a package. He was meeting someone who never seemed to show up. He wanted to ask Margaret about boarding his horse, and every time he found a reason to speak to Clara. He asked how she was settling in. He commented on the weather. He complimented the soap smell of the fresh linens. His voice was low and warm, with a drawl that spoke of Texas roots, and his smile was crooked and genuine. Clara kept her responses brief, polite but distant. She could not afford to let anyone get close, not when closeness meant questions she could not answer. But Isaac did not seem discouraged. If anything, her reserve only appeared to intrigue him more. One Saturday evening in late September, when the heat had finally broken and the air carried a hint of autumn coolness, Clara finished her work and stepped outside to watch the sunset. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, the kind of beauty that made even the harsh desert seem like paradise. She was so absorbed in the view that she did not hear footsteps until Isaac spoke. "Pretty, is it not?" She turned, startled. He stood a few feet away, hat in hand, looking at the sky with an expression of quiet appreciation. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the stubble on his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the ends. "Yes," she said, "it is." "I never get tired of it," Isaac said. "Sunsets out here, I mean, everyone is different." He glanced at her, that crooked smile appearing. "I am Isaac, by the way. Isaac Young. I know I have said hello a few times, but I do not think we have properly introduced ourselves. Clara Thompson." "It is nice to meet you properly, Miss Thompson." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "I hope you do not think I am being too forward, but I was wondering if you might like to take a walk sometime. Just around town, nothing improper." I know you are new here, and I thought you might like some company. Every instinct told Clara to refuse. Getting close to someone meant risk, meant eventual discovery, meant the shame she worked so hard to hide would be exposed. But there was something in Isaac's eyes, a gentleness and sincerity that made her want to say yes more than she had wanted anything in a long time. I do not think that would be appropriate, she said softly. But thank you for asking. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. I understand, but if you change your mind, the offer stands. He put his hat back on, tipped it to her, and walked away, leaving Clara with a strange, hollow feeling in her chest. She thought that would be the end of it, that Isaac would take the hint and leave her alone. But the next time he came to town, he brought her a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grew stubbornly in the desert despite the lack of water. Saw these on the ride in, he said simply, handing them to her. Thought they were pretty, thought you might like them. Clara took them with trembling hands, unable to remember the last time anyone had given her anything just to be kind. Thank you, she whispered, and that was how it began. Isaac courted her the old-fashioned way, with patience and respect. He brought her small gifts, a smooth stone from the creek, a hair ribbon from the general store, a slice of cake from the restaurant. He told her stories about the ranch, about the cattle drives and the other hands, about the time a rattlesnake spooked his horse and he ended up in a cactus patch. He made her laugh, something she had not done in so long it felt rusty and strange. And slowly, carefully, Clara let her guard down. They began taking those walks he had suggested, always in plain sight, always proper. Isaac pointed out constellations in the vast night sky and told her their names. He showed her where the best water was for miles around, knowledge that could save a life in the desert. He taught her to whistle by blowing on a blade of grass, and he asked her questions about herself that she answered as vaguely as possible, always steering the conversation back to him. But Isaac was perceptive. One evening in October, as they sat on a bench outside the hotel watching the stars come out, he said quietly, "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but I hope you know you can trust me, Clara. Whatever you are running from, whatever you are afraid of, it does not matter to me. I like you just as you are." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the shame she had carried for so long, but the words stuck in her throat. "I am not running from anything," she lied. "I just prefer to keep my past private." Isaac studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but the offer stands whenever you are ready." The trouble came a week later, on a day that started like any other. Clara was in the hotel lobby, sweeping the floor, when 3 men walked in. They were rough-looking, the kind who wore their guns low and their intentions clear. The leader was a bull of a man with a scar across his cheek and eyes like chips of ice. "Need rooms," he growled at Margaret, who had gone pale behind the desk. "We have 2 available," Margaret said, her voice steady despite her fear. "That will be $4. The man laughed, a sound without humor. $4, that is robbery, woman. That is the price." The scarred man leaned across the desk, and Clara saw Margaret flinch. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to give us those rooms, and you are going to forget we were here. Understand?" Clara's hands tightened on the broom handle. She knew she should stay quiet, stay invisible, but she could not watch Margaret be threatened. "Leave her alone," she heard herself say. All 3 men turned to look at her. The leader's eyes traveled over her slowly, appraisingly, in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well now," he said. "Looks like we have a brave one here. Just pay for your rooms and there will be no trouble," Clara said, forcing her voice to stay even. The man took a step toward her. "Maybe I want trouble. Maybe I like a woman with some fire in her." The door opened behind him and Isaac walked in. He took in the scene at a glance, his easy demeanor evaporating. "Is there a problem here?" The scarred man sized up Isaac, noting the gun at his hip, the way he stood balanced and ready. "No problem, Cowboy, just having a conversation." "Looked like harassment to me," Isaac said flatly. "The lady asked you to pay for your rooms. I suggest you do that." For a tense moment, Clara thought there would be violence. The air felt charged with it, crackling like lightning before a storm. But the scarred man must have decided Isaac was not worth the trouble, because he pulled out some crumpled bills and threw them on the desk. "Keep the change," he said mockingly, then gestured to his companions. They took their keys and headed upstairs, but not before the leader gave Clara one last look that promised this was not over. When they were gone, Margaret sagged against the desk. "Thank you, Isaac. I thought there was going to be trouble. Are you all right?" Isaac asked Clara, his eyes searching her face. She nodded, though her heart was still racing. "I am fine. Thank you for stepping in." "Those men are dangerous," Isaac said grimly. "I recognize the one with the scar. His name is Bill Craddock. He rides with a gang that has been rustling cattle and robbing stages. The law has been looking for them for months." He turned to Margaret. "You should send someone for the sheriff." Margaret shook her head. "The sheriff is 3 towns over dealing with some land dispute. His deputy is practically useless. By the time help arrived, those men would be long gone." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Then I will stay in town tonight just in case. I do not trust Craddock not to cause trouble." He rented a room at the hotel, despite Clara's protests that it was not necessary. But as the evening wore on and she felt the weight of Craddock's eyes whenever she passed his door, she was grateful for Isaac's presence. She finished her work as quickly as possible and retreated to her room, locking the door and pushing a chair against it for good measure. She did not sleep well. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window made her jump. She kept thinking about the man she had killed outside Tucson, about how easy it had been for violence to find her. Was she cursed to always be running, always be afraid? Sometime past midnight she heard voices in the hallway, men's voices, low and angry, then footsteps moving fast. A woman screamed. Clara was on her feet instantly, fear and instinct warring within her. She should stay in her room, stay safe. But what if someone needed help? She eased open her door and peered out. The hallway was dark except for a lamp burning at the far end. She could see shadows moving near Margaret's private quarters, hear the sound of a struggle. Without thinking, Clara grabbed the only weapon she had, a heavy candlestick, and moved toward the commotion. She rounded the corner to see Craddock holding Margaret by the arm, his other hand clamped over her mouth. One of his companions was rifling through a strongbox, pocketing money. They were robbing the hotel. "Let her go," Clara said, raising the candlestick. Craddock turned, his scarred face twisting into a grin. "The brave won again. You really do not know when to shut your mouth, do you?" He shoved Margaret aside and started toward Clara. She backed up, her heart hammering, knowing the candlestick would be useless against his bulk. But before he could reach her, a door flew open and Isaac burst out, his gun drawn. "Step back," Isaac ordered, his voice cold as winter. Craddock froze. His companion dropped the strongbox and reached for his own weapon, but Isaac was faster. "I would not if I were you. I am a fair shot, and at this range I will not miss." For a moment, everything hung in balance. Then Craddock laughed, that same humorless sound. "You would shoot an unarmed man, Cowboy." "You are not unarmed, you are just slow," Isaac said. "Now you and your friends are going to walk out of here real peaceful-like, get on your horses and ride out of town. And if I ever see you in Wilcox again, I will not be so generous." Craddock's eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake." "The only mistake would be testing me. Now move." The three outlaws must have seen something in Isaac's face that convinced them he meant business, because they backed toward the stairs, hands visible. Craddock pointed at Clara as he passed. "This is not over, girl. I do not forget a face." "Neither do I," Isaac said quietly. "Go." They left, the sound of their boots thundering down the stairs and out into the night. Isaac kept his gun drawn until they heard hoofbeats fading into the distance, then he finally lowered it. Margaret was crying softly, and Clara went to her, putting an arm around the older woman's shoulders. "They took about $30, Margaret said shakily, "but it could have been so much worse. Thank you both." Isaac holstered his gun. "You should still try to get word to the sheriff. Those men need to be arrested before they hurt someone." "I will send someone at first light," Margaret promised. She looked at Isaac with immense gratitude. "You saved us tonight. I will not forget it." He shook his head. Clara was the one who faced them down twice. "She has more courage than sense." "Or less sense than courage," Clara said weakly. And despite everything, they all laughed, the sound breaking the tension. But afterward, when Margaret had gone back to bed and the hotel was quiet again, Isaac walked Clara to her door. "You could have been killed," he said, and there was something raw in his voice. "When I heard you out there facing those men alone." "I could not just hide while someone needed help," Clara said. "I know. That is one of the things I admire about you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are remarkable, Clara Thompson." The touch sent warmth flooding through her. She looked up at him, at the concern and something deeper in his eyes, and before she could think better of it, she rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for protecting us." She slipped into her room before he could respond, her heart racing for an entirely different reason now. She pressed her back against the door and touched her lips, hardly believing what she had done. But she did not regret it. The next morning, word spread through town about the confrontation at the hotel. Isaac became something of a hero, though he shrugged off the praise with characteristic modesty. The sheriff's deputy eventually came by to take statements, and Clara watched nervously as he pulled out a notepad and asked her to write down what had happened. "I am sorry, but my hand is still bothering me from an injury," Clara lied, showing him her hand. "Could I just tell you what happened?" The deputy, a lazy young man who clearly did not want to be bothered, agreed readily enough. Clara gave him the details verbally, and he wrote them down in messy scrawl. But as she spoke, she felt Isaac's eyes on her, thoughtful and considering. She wondered how many times he had heard her use that excuse about her hand. She wondered if he was starting to see through her lies. After the deputy left, Isaac found her behind the hotel, hanging laundry as usual. "Clara, can I talk to you for a minute?" Her stomach clenched. "Of course." He seemed to struggle with how to begin, then said gently, "I noticed you told the deputy you could not write because of your hand. Same thing you told Margaret when you first arrived." Clara's face burned. "My hand gets tired easily, old injury." "Clara." He said her name softly, without judgment. "I am not trying to embarrass you, but I think I know what is really going on." She wanted to run, to disappear into the desert and never look back, but her feet stayed rooted to the ground. "I do not know what you mean." "I think you do." Isaac took a step closer, his voice kind. "I think you cannot read or write, and I think you are ashamed of it." The words hung between them, the truth finally spoken aloud. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to deny it, but she was so tired of lying. "So what if I cannot?" she said, her voice breaking. "What difference does it make to you?" "It makes a difference because I care about you," Isaac said, "and because you should not have to carry that shame. There is no dishonor in not knowing something. The only dishonor is in refusing to learn." "Easy for you to say," Clara said bitterly. "You probably went to school, had teachers, had books. Some of us were not so lucky." "You are right," Isaac said quietly. "I did go to school. My mother was a school teacher back in Texas, and she made sure all her children could read and write. But I have known plenty of good people who never had that chance. It does not make them less worthy, less intelligent, or less valuable." He paused. "Would you let me teach you?" Clara stared at him. "What?" "Would you let me teach you to read and write?" "I am not a trained teacher, but I know the basics. And I would be patient. I would never judge you or make you feel bad about not knowing something." It was the kindest offer anyone had ever made her, and it terrified her. Learning meant admitting her weakness, meant spending time with Isaac in a way that would make her vulnerable in every sense. But it also meant freedom. It meant being able to read a menu, a sign, a letter. It meant having a voice in a world that silenced the illiterate. "Why would you do that for me?" she whispered. Isaac smiled, that crooked smile that made her heart flutter. "Because I think you are worth it, Clara, and because I would like to spend more time with you if you will let me." She wiped at her eyes, hardly daring to believe this was real. "Where would we do this? People would talk if they saw us alone together." "My boss, Mr. Henderson, he has a line shack about an hour's ride from here. It is empty most of the time, used for the hands during roundups. There is a fireplace and some basic furniture. If you could get Sunday evenings free, I could meet you there. We would be chaperoned by the stars and moon," he added with a small smile. All very proper. It was risky and improper despite his words, but Clara found herself nodding. "Sunday evenings. I will tell Margaret I need time for myself to walk and pray. She will not question that. Then it is settled." Isaac's whole face lit up. "I will bring books and paper. We will start simple. By spring you will be reading novels if you want," and so their lessons began. That first Sunday evening in late October, Clara borrowed a horse from the hotel's stable and rode out to the line shack following Isaac's directions. She found it easily enough, a small weathered building nestled against a rocky outcropping. Isaac was already there, building a fire in the stone fireplace. He had brought an oil lamp, several books, paper, pencils, and a slate. "I thought we would start with the alphabet," he said, his excitement endearing. "You said you knew the alphabet song, so we just need to connect the sounds to the letters." Clara sat on the rough wooden floor near the fire, feeling like a child on her first day of school. Isaac settled beside her, careful to keep a respectable distance, and opened a primer. "This was my youngest sister's book. I borrowed it from home." He started by showing her the letters, having her trace them on the slate with chalk. A for apple, B for bird, C for cat. Clara's hands shook at first, embarrassed by how clumsy her letters looked, but Isaac was endlessly patient. "You are doing great," he encouraged. "Just practice the shape. There is no rush." They worked until the sun set and the fire provided the only light. Isaac had brought food, bread and cheese and apples, and they ate while he told her about his day, about the new calf that had been born and the fence that needed mending. He made it easy to relax, to forget her embarrassment and just enjoy his company. As autumn deepened into winter, their Sunday evening lessons became the highlight of Clara's week. She progressed faster than either of them expected, her sharp mind hungrily soaking up knowledge once it was offered. By November, she could write her name. By December, she was reading simple words and sounding out more complex ones. And through it all, Isaac sat by the fire with her, his patience never wavering, his encouragement constant. But they were also falling in love, though neither spoke of it directly. It was there in the way Isaac's eyes softened when he looked at her, in the way Clara found herself dressing more carefully on Sundays, in the moments when their hands brushed and neither pulled away. It was there in the stories they shared. Isaac telling her about his family back in Texas, Clara slowly opening up about her difficult childhood and the losses she had endured. One evening in mid-December, when the desert air had turned genuinely cold and the fire burned bright against the chill, Clara successfully read an entire passage from a children's book without help. She looked up at Isaac with such joy that he laughed and pulled her into a hug without thinking. For a moment they froze, suddenly aware of how close they were, how alone they were, how easy it would be to cross the line between teacher and student into something more. Isaac pulled back, his face flushed. "I am sorry. That was inappropriate." "No," Clara said quickly. "It was nice. I have not had many people to celebrate with." "You should be proud of yourself," Isaac said. "You have come so far in just 2 months. Most people would have given up." "I had a good teacher." She hesitated, then said softly, "Isaac, I want you to know how much this means to me. Not just the reading, but all of it. You treating me like I matter, you being patient, you never making me feel stupid." "You are not stupid, Clara. You are one of the smartest people I know. You just never had the chance to learn." "Well, I have the chance now, thanks to you." They looked at each other in the firelight, and Clara saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. But Isaac was too much of a gentleman to take advantage of the situation, and Clara was too uncertain of herself to make the first move. So instead, they returned to the lesson, both acutely aware of the shift that had occurred between them. Christmas came and went. Margaret gave Clara a day off and a small bonus, which Clara used to buy Isaac a gift, a set of new pencils from the general store. She gave them to him at their next lesson, wrapped in plain brown paper. "You did not have to do this," Isaac said, but he was clearly pleased. "You have given me so much," Clara said. "This is nothing." "It is not nothing." He pulled out a small package of his own. "I got you something too." Clara unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal, the pages blank and full of possibility. "Isaac, this is too expensive." "I want you to fill it with your thoughts," he said. "Your stories, your feelings, whatever you want. Your words matter, Clara. They deserve to be written down." She traced the soft leather with trembling fingers. No one had ever given her something so precious, so full of faith in her abilities. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will use it." "I will. I promise." As winter deepened, their lessons continued. Clara's reading improved rapidly, and she began tackling more complex texts. Isaac brought her newspapers, dime novels, even poetry. She read about the world beyond Wilcox, about politics and wars and inventions. She read stories of adventure and romance, of people who overcame impossible odds. And slowly, the shame that had defined her for so long began to fade, replaced by pride in what she was accomplishing. But the outside world intruded on their peaceful routine one cold January evening. Clara was riding to the line shack when she spotted riders in the distance. Something about the way they moved made her uneasy, and she urged her horse faster, reaching the cabin just as Isaac emerged with a concerned expression. "Did you see those riders?" he asked. "Yes. Should we be worried?" "Maybe." Isaac's hand rested on his gun. "There have been reports of rustlers in the area. Mr. Henderson lost 20 head of cattle last week." They decided to proceed with the lesson but kept alert. Clara was reading aloud from a newspaper article about Arizona's territorial legislature when they heard horses approaching. Isaac immediately put out the lamp, leaving only the firelight. He positioned himself by the door, gun drawn, while Clara stood behind him, her heart pounding. The door burst open without warning. 3 men pushed inside, and Clara's blood turned to ice when she recognized the leader's scarred face. Bill Craddock, he grinned when he saw her. Well, the brave girl and her cowboy all alone in a cabin, this is almost too easy." Isaac's gun was up instantly. "Get out." Craddock looked at the weapon and laughed. "You going to shoot all 3 of us before one of us shoots you?" "I do not think so, Cowboy." His eyes slid to Clara. "We have been watching you too. Every Sunday evening riding out here alone, very cozy. What do you want? Isaac asked coldly. Information. Where does Henderson keep his cattle this time of year? And do not lie to me. I know you are one of his top hands. I will not tell you anything. Craddock's expression hardened. I was hoping you would say that. Boys, grab the girl. The two other men moved toward Clara. Isaac fired a warning shot that splintered the doorframe near one man's head. Touch her and I will kill you all. You have 2 bullets left in that gun, Craddock said. 3 of us. The math does not work in your favor. Maybe not, Isaac said, but I guarantee you will be one of the dead ones. The standoff stretched out, tension thick enough to cut. Clara's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. They were trapped, outgunned, with no help coming, unless... Wait, she said. I will tell you what you want to know. Isaac shot her a sharp look. Clara, no. I will not let them hurt you, she said, meeting his eyes. To Craddock, she said, I can draw you a map. I have seen the cattle ranges when I ride out here. I can show you where the main herds are. Craddock studied her suspiciously. You can draw a map. You literate girl, Clara forced herself to nod, even though the lie made her sick. Yes. Give me paper and pencil. One of the men handed her a scrap of paper and a stub of pencil. Clara took them with shaking hands and began to draw, making it look like she knew what she was doing. In reality, she was just making marks and lines, buying time, praying that somehow help would come or an opportunity would present itself. Isaac watched her, and she could see the realization dawning in his eyes. He knew she was not drawing an accurate map. He knew she was stalling. The question was whether Craddock would figure it out. Clara made the map as complicated as possible, adding fake landmarks and trails. She wrote labels that she hoped looked convincing but were actually gibberish. And all the while, she watched the outlaws, looking for any opening. It came when Craddock leaned over to look at the map, momentarily blocking his companion's view. Isaac caught Clara's eye and jerked his head slightly toward the fireplace. She understood instantly. She dropped the paper and dove for the fireplace, grabbing a burning log. At the same moment, Isaac fired, hitting one of the other men in the shoulder. Clara swung the burning log at the third man, who yelped and stumbled back. Isaac used the confusion to tackle Craddock, and the 2 men went down in a tangle of fists and fury. Clara swung the log again, keeping the injured man and his companion at bay, her terror transforming into fierce determination. The fight was brutal and fast. Isaac and Craddock rolled across the floor, each trying to gain the upper hand. Craddock was bigger, but Isaac was younger and faster. He landed a solid punch to Craddock's jaw that snapped the outlaw's head back, then another to his ribs. Craddock wheezed and tried to reach for his gun, but Isaac got there first, kicking it away. Clara, get out, Isaac shouted. Ride for help, but Clara was not leaving him. She saw one of the other men recovering, reaching for his weapon, and she did the only thing she could think of. She threw the burning log at him. It hit him square in the chest, and his shirt caught fire. He screamed and rolled on the ground, trying to extinguish the flames. The third man, seeing his companions down and a crazy woman wielding fire, decided discretion was the better part of valor. He ran for the door and disappeared into the night. Clara heard hoofbeats rapidly fading. Craddock was still fighting, but Isaac finally landed a punch that left the outlaw dazed and bloody. Isaac grabbed rope from his saddlebag and quickly tied Craddock's hands. The man Clara had shot groaned on the floor, clutching his shoulder. The one who had been on fire had managed to put out the flames but was badly burned and in no shape to fight. Isaac checked to make sure they were all secure, then turned to Clara. Are you hurt? No, you. I will have some bruises, but I am fine. He looked at her with something like awe. You threw a burning log at a man. I was not going to let them hurt you, Clara said, her voice shaking now that the danger had passed. "I was not going to just run and leave you." Isaac crossed the small space between them and pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face in his chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. "You are incredible," he murmured. "Brave and clever and incredible." "I drew a fake map," Clara admitted. "I did not know what else to do. I know, I saw, and it worked." He pulled back just enough to look down at her. "That map was gibberish, was it not? You just made it look good." Clara nodded, embarrassed. "I tried to remember what words look like, how they are shaped. I hoped it would fool them long enough. It did." Isaac's expression was soft with admiration and something deeper. "Clara, I need to tell you something. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was afraid of scaring you away. I am in love with you, completely, hopelessly in love with you." Clara's breath caught. "Isaac. I know I am just a cowboy with not much to offer. But I would spend every evening for the rest of my life teaching you, talking with you, being with you if you would let me. You are the strongest, smartest, most amazing woman I have ever met, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Tears streamed down Clara's face, but for once they were happy tears. "I love you too. I have for a while now. I was just afraid to say it, afraid you would realize I was not good enough for you." "Not good enough?" Isaac looked almost angry. "Clara, you are too good for me. You have overcome more in your life than most people face in 10 lifetimes. You have taught yourself to survive alone in a world that is not kind to women on their own, and in just a few months, you have learned what takes most people years. You are extraordinary." "I am extraordinary because of you," Clara said. "You saw me when I was invisible. You treated me like I mattered when the world told me I did not. You gave me the tools to change my life." "We gave that to each other," Isaac said softly, and then he was kissing her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, it deepened into something that spoke of all the feelings they had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Isaac said. "I know it is sudden, but I know my heart. Marry me, Clara." "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They kissed again and might have forgotten entirely about their captives if Craddock had not groaned loudly. Isaac reluctantly released Clara and turned to deal with the outlaws. "I need to get these men to the sheriff. Can you ride back to town and let Margaret know what happened? Tell her to send word to Mr. Henderson that we have caught the rustlers." "I am coming with you," Clara said firmly. "After everything we just went through, I am not letting you out of my sight." Isaac looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at her face and he nodded. "All right, but stay close." They loaded the 3 wounded, tied outlaws onto horses and began the long ride to the nearest town with a proper sheriff. It took most of the night, and by the time they arrived, dawn was breaking over the desert. The sheriff was surprised but pleased to have the wanted men in custody, especially when he learned they had information about the larger gang. "There will be a reward," the sheriff told Isaac. "These men have been terrorizing the territory for months." "I do not want a reward for doing what is right," Isaac said. "But if there is one, it goes to Miss Thompson here. She is the one who helped capture them." The sheriff looked at Clara with new respect. "That's so." "Well, madam, there is probably a couple $100 in it once all is said and done. That is a good sum." Clara could hardly believe it. $200 was more money than she had seen in her entire life. "Thank you," she managed. They left the outlaws in the sheriff's capable hands and began the ride back to Wilcox. Clara was exhausted, filthy and sore, but happier than she had ever been. Isaac rode close beside her, occasionally reaching over to take her hand, as if he needed to reassure himself that she was really there and really his. When they arrived back in Wilcox, News of their capture of the rustlers had somehow preceded them. Margaret was waiting at the hotel, and she burst into tears when she saw them safe. "I was so worried when you did not come back last night," Clara hugged her. "I am sorry. We had some trouble, but we are fine. And Margaret, I have news. Isaac and I are getting married." Margaret's tears turned to joy. She hugged them both. "Oh, that is wonderful. I knew you two were perfect for each other from the moment I saw how he looked at you." Over the next few weeks, Clara's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The reward money came through, $300 in the end, enough to give her and Isaac a real start. Isaac talked to Mr. Henderson about building a small house on a corner of the ranch, and his boss agreed, even offering to help with materials. Clara continued her lessons, determined to be fully literate by the time of her wedding. They were married in April of 1885, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Wilcox. Margaret stood up for Clara, and one of Isaac's fellow ranch hands stood up for him. Clara wore a new dress, pale blue calico, and carried wildflowers. Isaac wore his best clothes and could not stop smiling. When the preacher asked if she would take Isaac as her husband, Clara said, "I do," in a clear, strong voice, nothing like the frightened woman who had stumbled into town 6 months earlier. And when it came time to sign the marriage register, she wrote her name in careful, precise letters. Clara Thompson, young. Isaac squeezed her hand as she wrote, his eyes bright with pride and love. "Perfect," he whispered. Their little house was finished by summer, a simple 2-room cabin with a front porch and a view of the mountains. Isaac built her a bookshelf, which Clara slowly filled with volumes bought from the general store or borrowed from neighbors. She kept her leather journal on the nightstand beside their bed, filling its pages with her thoughts, her memories, and eventually, stories of her own invention. Life on the ranch was hard but good. Clara helped Isaac with the work when she could, and took in sewing and laundry to earn extra money. She discovered she had a talent for letters, and began helping neighbors write to distant relatives or fill out official forms. Word spread that Mrs. Young was patient and trustworthy, and soon she had a small, steady income from her writing services. She never told anyone about her past illiteracy, though she suspected Margaret had guessed the truth. It did not matter. That shame belonged to a different Clara, a woman who had believed she was worthless because she could not read. The woman Clara had become knew her worth, and it had nothing to do with letters on a page, but she never forgot the gift Isaac had given her. Every evening, even after long days of work, they sat together by the fire. Sometimes Isaac read to her, his voice weaving stories of faraway places. Sometimes Clara read to him, still marveling at her ability to turn symbols into words into worlds. And sometimes they just talked, sharing their dreams and fears and hopes for the future. "I want to teach our children to read," Clara said one evening, her hand resting on her stomach where their first child grew. "I want them to never feel the shame I felt." "They will not," Isaac promised. "We will make sure of that. And when they are older, you can tell them about their mother's courage, how she learned to read by firelight and faced down outlaws and never gave up." "Will you tell them about their father?" Clara asked, smiling. "The cowboy who saw a woman others ignored, who taught her not just letters but her own worth." "I will tell them I was the lucky one," Isaac said, kissing her forehead. "The luckiest man in the whole territory." Their first child was born in the winter of 1886, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. They named him James, and Clara cried happy tears when she wrote his name in the family Bible, her letters sure and steady. 2 years later came a daughter, Rose, with dark curls and a sunny disposition. And 3 years after that, another son, Thomas, who arrived during a thunderstorm and always seemed to carry that energy with him. Clara taught all her children to read as soon as they could talk, much to Isaac's amusement. "They are still babies," he would protest when Clara pointed out letters in their picture books. "It is never too early to learn," Clara would insist, and continue her gentle teaching. As the children grew, the little house became too small, and Isaac built an addition. The ranch prospered under Mr. Henderson's management, and Isaac was eventually made foreman, a position of respect and responsibility. Clara's writing services expanded to include keeping books for some of the local businesses, and she earned a reputation for meticulous accuracy. Sometimes, late at night, Clara would think about the frightened woman who had ridden into Wilcox with blood on her hands and shame in her heart. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. But in a way, it had. That woman had died, and in her place was someone stronger, someone who had learned that shame was just another name for fear, and fear could be overcome with courage and love. One evening when Clara was 35, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Isaac joined her. Their children were inside, James reading to his younger siblings from one of their mother's beloved books. The sound of their voices drifted through the open window, sweet and clear. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked, settling beside her. "Marrying a cowboy, living out here instead of in a city somewhere with more opportunities?" Clara took his weathered hand in hers, thinking about everything they had built together. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I needed, Isaac. Not just the reading, though that changed my life. You gave me belief in myself. You gave me love and respect and partnership. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. How could I regret any of that?" "I think I got the better end of the deal," Isaac said, smiling that crooked smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "A brilliant, beautiful, fierce woman who throws burning logs at outlaws and writes letters that make people cry. I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," Clara said. "We found each other when we needed each other most." As the sun set and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. Inside, James stumbled over a word and Rose helped him sound it out. Clara smiled, thinking about those first lessons by the fire, about Isaac's patience and her terror, and the slow building of confidence that came with each successfully read word. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Mr. Henderson died and left a portion of the ranch to Isaac in his will, recognizing decades of faithful service. Clara's writing business grew until she was helping people throughout the territory, not just Wilcox. She even helped a few other adults learn to read, never charging them a cent, just passing on the gift Isaac had given her. Their children grew and married and had children of their own. James became a teacher, inspired by his mother's love of learning. Rose married a banker and moved to Tucson, though she visited often. Thomas took over the ranch from Isaac, proving himself a capable and fair manager. Isaac's hair turned gray, then white. Clara's face gained lines from years of sun and smiling, but the love between them never faded, never wavered. Every evening they still sat together by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. When Isaac was 62, a bad fall from a horse left him with a limp he would carry the rest of his life. Clara nursed him through the painful recovery, reading to him for hours when he was too restless to sleep. "You have come full circle," he joked. "Now you are the teacher and I am the student." "We have always been both," Clara said. "That is what makes us work." They celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, the little house bursting with love and laughter. Clara looked around at all the faces, at the family she and Isaac had created, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been, afraid and ashamed, certain she had nothing to offer the world. How wrong she had been. That night, as they prepared for bed, Isaac handed her a package wrapped in brown paper. "I know we said no gifts, but I could not resist." Clara opened it to find a beautiful new journal, the leather even softer than the first one he had given her so many years ago. But this one was not empty. The first page had an inscription in Isaac's careful handwriting. "For my Clara, whose words changed my world. May you fill this with stories as beautiful as the life we have built together. All my love always, Isaac." She held the book to her chest, tears flowing freely. "I love you so much. I love you too. More than I could ever express with words, though God knows you have taught me plenty of them over the years." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You are my everything, Clara, my partner, my love, my best friend." Every evening we spent by that fire, learning letters, I was really learning what it meant to be completely, utterly in love. "Those evenings saved my life," Clara said. "In every way that matters, you saved my life." "We saved each other," Isaac corrected gently. "That is what love does." They lay down together in the bed they had shared for a quarter century, holding each other close. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the sage, carrying with it the scent of rain that might or might not come. Inside, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, the books and photographs and treasures accumulated over decades, Clara and Isaac drifted off to sleep. The years that followed were golden. They watched their grandchildren grow, passing on stories and lessons and love. Clara wrote her memoirs, a gift for the family, chronicling her journey from illiterate drifter to respected woman of letters. She wrote about the shame she had carried and how Isaac had helped her shed it. She wrote about the importance of education, of patience, of seeing people for who they could become rather than who they appeared to be. When she finished the manuscript, she gave it first to Isaac to read. He sat in his favorite chair by the fire, reading slowly, and when he was done, his eyes were wet. "This is beautiful," he said. "This is important. People need to read this, Clara, not just our family, everyone." "Do you really think so?" "I know so. There are so many people out there carrying the same shame you carried, thinking they are less because they cannot read. This could help them." Encouraged by Isaac's faith, Clara sent her manuscript to a publisher in San Francisco. To her astonishment, they accepted it. Her book was published in 1902, titled By Firelight, A Woman's Journey from Shame to Strength. It sold modestly but steadily, and Clara received letters from readers all over the country, many of them adults who had learned to read late in life or were working up the courage to try. Each letter she answered personally, encouraging them, sharing her experience, reminding them that it was never too late to learn. She became something of an advocate for adult literacy, corresponding with educators and reformers. Some called her brave for revealing her past shame so publicly. Clara just called it honest. Isaac was immensely proud of her, showing the book to anyone who would look at it. "My wife, the author," he would say, his voice full of wonder and love. As they entered their 70s, their bodies slowed but their minds remained sharp. They moved into town, into a small house near the hotel where they had met all those years ago. Margaret had long since passed, but her daughter ran the hotel now, and she welcomed the elderly couple warmly. Every evening, Clara and Isaac still sat together, though now it was on a porch swing rather than by a fire. They watched the town grow and change, saw automobiles replace horses, heard about airplanes and electricity and all the wonders of the modern age. But some things remained constant. Their love, their partnership, their commitment to each other. When Isaac died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Clara held his hand and whispered all the things she had never stopped telling him. How much she loved him, how grateful she was, how he had given her everything. She read to him from their favorite books, her voice steady despite her tears, because she knew he could hear her even as he slipped away. She buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a sky so wide and blue it seemed to go on forever. The whole town came to the funeral, testament to the man Isaac had been and the lives he had touched. Clara stood dry-eyed through the service, saving her tears for private moments, and when people offered condolences, she thanked them with grace. But when everyone had left and she stood alone at his grave, she finally let herself cry. She cried for the loss of the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had taught her not just to read but to believe in herself. She cried for all the evenings they would not share, all the sunsets they would not watch together, all the words she would never get to say to him again. But she also smiled through her tears, remembering everything they had shared. The laughter and the lessons, the adventures and the quiet moments, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren they had created together. She thought about that first evening by the fire when she had been so terrified and ashamed, and Isaac had offered her hope disguised as alphabet lessons. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind, "for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for teaching me that I was worth more than I believed. I will love you until I take my last breath, and then I will find you again, and we will sit together by whatever fire exists beyond this life, and I will tell you all the stories I have been saving up." Clara lived another 8 years after Isaac's death, years she filled with her family and her writing and her advocacy work. She published a second book, this one a collection of short stories about life in the Old West, and it was even more successful than the first. She donated much of the proceeds to schools and literacy programs, wanting to give others the chances she had been given. She taught her great-grandchildren to read, just as she had taught their parents and grandparents before them. She told them stories about their great-grandfather Isaac, the cowboy with the patient heart and the unwavering faith in people. She made sure they understood that education was a gift, never to be taken for granted. On a clear spring evening in 1920, Clara Thompson Young passed away in her sleep at the age of 86. Her family found her in her chair by the window, a book open in her lap, and a smile on her face. In her hand was the first journal Isaac had ever given her, the leather worn soft from decades of use, filled cover to cover with her words. They buried her beside Isaac on the hill, under that same infinite sky. Her grandson read from her memoir at the service, the part where she described learning to write her name for the first time, and there was not a dry eye in attendance. In the years that followed, Clara's books remained in print, passed down through generations. Teachers assigned them in schools. Adult literacy programs used them as inspiration, and her story of overcoming shame and learning by firelight continued to touch lives long after she was gone. And sometimes, on clear evenings when the desert wind blew just right, people claimed they could see 2 figures sitting on the hill where Clara and Isaac were buried. They sat close together, outlined by the setting sun, and it looked almost like they were reading, their heads bent over a book, sharing words and love and everything that had made their life together so rich. Those who saw them always felt a warmth in their hearts, a reminder that true love never really dies. It just changes form, becoming memory and legacy and story, passed down like precious treasures to light the way for others. The cowboy and the woman he taught to read, together forever, still learning, still loving, still showing the world that shame can be transformed into strength, and that literacy is not just about words on a page, but about believing in the infinite worth of every human soul. Their great-great-grandchildren still gather on that hill sometimes, bringing their children to see where it all began. They tell the story of Clara and Isaac, of lessons by firelight and courage in the face of shame, of a love that built a legacy. And when the children ask if the story is true, the answer is always the same. Every word of it, from the first to the last, from the blood on Clara Thompson's hands had long since dried to happily ever after. Because that is what it was. A happy ending earned through courage and patience and love. A happy ending that began with shame and became strength, that started with illiteracy and ended with books that would outlive their author. A happy ending written one letter at a time by firelight, by two people who found each other exactly when they needed each other most, and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. In Wilcox, Arizona, where it all began, there is a small library now named after Clara Thompson Young. Above the door is a plaque with her favorite quote, words she wrote in her memoir. "I was ashamed of my illiteracy, so a cowboy taught me to read by the fire every single evening, and in learning letters, I learned love, and in learning love, I learned that I was never shameful at all, just waiting for someone to show me my own worth." And inside that library, every evening as the sun sets and the desert turns gold, someone sits down with a book, and the legacy continues. Words changing lives, one reader at a time, just as Isaac changed Clara's life all those years ago with his patient teaching and boundless faith. The story lives on, as all true love stories do, forever and always, by firelight or electric light or any light at all, as long as there are people willing to see each other, really see each other and say, "You matter, your story matters, let me help you tell it." That is the gift Clara and Isaac gave the world, and it is a gift that will never stop giving from generation to generation, world without end.